Royal Standley of Oregon Pacific Financial Advisors, offering securities through United Planners Financial Services, member FINRA, SIPC, shares his planning approach to help people toward a place where they may be at peace regarding their financial goals. In this dynamic podcast, Royal will share his insights on how to design a retirement plan to help you plan for your future. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Life by Design podcast with Royal Standley from Oregon Pacific Financial Advisors. Today, Royal is going to be giving us an overview of what their Life by Design process truly is. Good afternoon, Royal. How are you?
I'm doing great, Eric. How are you doing?
Fantastic, man. I'm excited to get into this because you and I have discussed this a little bit as far as kind of what you do with clients, but I'm excited for you to share it with our audience and really get into a good, probably a 30,000-foot view at this point. We'll probably do some other podcasts to really break it down, but why don't you start by telling us kind of what are the first steps or what are the things that you want to accomplish when you take a client through the Life by Design process?
Yeah, absolutely. So every financial planner is going to be different. Every financial advisor approaches their client and their practice quite a bit differently. And so if you've worked with a financial advisor in the past, you'll probably see some similarities and probably some pretty big differences there. Mm-hmm. So my entire outlook on sitting down with a client isn't really to focus on their investments and that sort of thing, although that's a big part of what we do. But it's really to sit down and help engage them in this process of designing the rest of their lives to have the outcomes that they're looking for, whether that's as simple as making sure that they just don't run out of money, or if it's as complex of we have some charitable giving goals, we want to pass down our business to our kids without alienating the kids that don't work in the business. We can sit down and design that plan really from the ground up with that input from the client so that they can walk out of the office after we've gone through this 3-meeting process with a sense of well-being and that they have a plan that they can follow and live with to reach all of those goals.
Okay, Royal, I'm sorry. I'm in my mid-40s. I don't know what I want for the rest of my life. How are you going to help me design, like you said, design the rest of your life? How can you possibly help me do that when I have no idea what I want?
That is a fantastic question. Most of the clients I sit down with don't have a good sense of what their next step should be. They just know that they need to do some planning. Mm-hmm. So one of the first things I want to do is just open up and make sure we maintain all of their available options. So what that looks like is how can we maximize what you're doing right now so that when you grow up, when you figure out what it is you want to do when you grow up, mm-hmm. you have preserved all those options by doing the prerequisite savings, looking at your career and saying, are you in the right career? Are you doing the right things to maximize your career? Are there other opportunities that you might like to explore there? And so, for instance, it's that question of, should we refinance the house, for instance? Should we look to move? Should we take on debt to build out this business? All of those are questions that you might have along the way. And by doing this kind of initial planning process and having a financial plan we can fall back to, we can help you identify and evaluate all those opportunities you're going to have for the next 30 plus years of your career.
Yeah, you bring up some good points because I honestly, I wouldn't know to ask if I should refinance my house. I'm making my mortgage payment. I just make it every month, and I'm just kind of going along, knowing that it'll someday will be paid off. But I know what I want for the future, as in I want to retire. My wife and I like to travel. We want to be able to spoil the grandkids a bit. We want to be able to not have to work all the time. We're both still going to work in some capacity, whether it's volunteering or actual work that we get paid for. But you bring up some good points as far as the questions I don't know to ask. Why would it be important to do something like a refinance, and how could that play into my overall strategy? So how do you broach that subject with your clients when we sit down?
So that leads us right into the first step of what we call our Life by Design process. Okay. And that's really just guided discovery. And that's just where we sit down with you and your wife and we just talk about, hey, where are you at right now? What's your family look like? Mm-hmm. Is it your kids? Are there children from a previous marriage? Are there any special needs that you're dealing with? And we just try to paint that picture of what's brought you to this point. What are the experiences you've been through in life that are coloring your outlook for the future? And then from there, once we kind of have that history lesson, then we want to start asking those questions of, okay, so where are you going now? And right now, it might be, well, we know we need to plan for college down the road. And the question becomes, how much energy and resources should we put behind that goal versus saving for retirement, versus getting the house paid off, versus all the other things you want to do and enjoy in your 40s and 50s. And so as we kind of build those priorities out, we can really help you and the rest of our clients define what's important to them. And that's one of the big joys of my life, is just sitting down with a new client and learning about the things that are important to them. And like I said, sometimes it's as simple as, I just want to make sure I have enough money to retire someday.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I get a general picture of kind of what you're talking about. Can you give me some more specific examples of kind of how this has played out so I know what to expect?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I remember probably 7-8 years ago sitting down with some clients, and they were kind of public employees, but they really had a passion to open up an orphanage in India.
Wow.
And so that really kind of steered our discussion there, because they knew they had to plan for retirement. They knew that was out there, and something important that, that's the responsibility they had to plan for that. Mm-hmm. But they also had a calling to help these orphans in India. And so we sat down and began just kind of strategizing and seeing, what options do you have in front of you that over the next 2 to 5 years we can take advantage of, so that not only can you pursue this thing you have to do, but also this thing that you feel called to do. Mm-hmm. So that's one way. A lot of times it's also just that conversation of, what does retirement look like for you? And it amazes me how many people just don't have a good sense of what they'd like to do in retirement beyond not have to work 5 days a week. So we try to sit down and try to kind of divine from them, what's important. Is it travel? Is it grandkids? Is it pursuing a hobby? Is it volunteer work, and kind of expanding your world that way? So that's always a fun one. And I got to say, one of the things I really try to get people to do, especially before they retire, is have that game plan. Have that game plan of how you're going to spend the first, let's say, 2 to 5 years, and what things are you going to pursue and where are you going to spend your energy? Because the last thing we want to see is somebody who just kind of says, okay, I'm done on a Friday, I'm retired now, and now it's just sitting on the porch, and we're just waiting for something to happen.
Yeah.
That's not a very successful way to enjoy retirement. Now, some people, that is their dream, is just to have some peace and quiet, and we're more than happy to help people get to that dream. But I think for most people, it's looking for that next phase of their life that's going to give their lives meaning.
Absolutely. So we've sat down. We've gone through this guided discovery. You've pulled out a ton of information from us. Now what do we do?
So at this point, my hope is at the end of the guided discovery process, we'll have enough information to start building that narrative about what those priorities are. And then from there, that's our first meeting process, or what we're trying to get out of our first meeting. From there, we'll take all that information you gave us, and this is where all the boring stuff comes in. This is where we take copies of your tax returns, your 401k statements, all that good stuff, all the numbers.
This is where we leave, right? And you get to do the boring stuff?
Exactly.
Oh, good.
Exactly. Because those are simply tools that you have in your toolbox that we're going to use and help you kind of maximize in the financial plan. So we'll take all that information and take those priorities that hopefully we've helped you define and refine and start building a financial plan.
Okay.
And so in that financial plan, we're going to start looking at all of the things that you brought up, and then bring in kind of our overlay of all the other important things that we know people have to consider when they go into retirement. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to overwhelm you there in that first appointment and say, okay, have you thought about X, Y, Z, and A, B, C? We want to kind of take a step back and look at, what's your estate plan looking like right now? What's your tax situation looking like? Are there any special needs we have to plan for? How are you invested? So we'll kind of take a look at that as we build the financial plan so that when we sit down for our second meeting, we'll have a pretty good idea there. And in our second meeting, that's where we're delivering our plan. But at the same time, we haven't carved anything in stone at that point, because the thing I have found most often here is after that guided discovery meeting, especially with a married couple, there's a lot of discussion that takes place that I'm not privy to.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Because hopefully I've uncovered some things where, one spouse is really set on, staying and not traveling, and the other spouse really just wants to travel, and they've never had that conversation of what retirement looks like for them. So by building the financial plan but not setting anything in stone, we can have a really exciting kind of second appointment where we get to really kind of dig into what's come out of that first appointment, but at the same time having that framework to start working from and answering questions about the financial direction they want to head. One of my funnest cases I worked on is we had a great guided discovery meeting. I put together their financial plan. And I think it was probably 10 days to 2 weeks later, we sat back down again. And I was like, okay, great. Did you guys have any questions after our last meeting? Did anything come up? And they were like, yeah, we decided to buy a rental. Now, mind you, they had not owned rentals before. It was not something that came up in our first appointment.
All right.
But they had decided that, hey, you know what we'd really like to do? We'd really like to fix up a rental and make that part of our retirement plan. And they did that in that short window of time there. And now, mind you, we really had to kind of do some creative work there to get things back on track. But that's the thing we love to see is people kind of walking away from that meeting saying, you know what, this is a direction I really want to head now.
Absolutely, because it's so funny that you mentioned that, because things change all the time. And so having that constant communication with your trusted advisor or with your team is vitally important, because just out of my own personal life, my wife and I are now empty nesters, and we've loved the home we live in, and we've always been very active in sports for years and years and years. But now my wife and I are thinking a 3-story home or 3 flights of stairs is getting a little tiresome on our knees. And that's just changed in the last 4 or 5 years. So looking at, okay, how about a nice ranch style home instead of what we have now? Because it's too big for us. And we wouldn't have said that 3 years ago. It wouldn't have crossed our minds, but now we're getting a little tired of all the stairs in the home. Those are the types of things that change all the time. So having that define and design concept and really that open communication seems really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said when we first started off, what I want to do when I design our plans is leave you as many options on the table as possible. Nice. Because if there's anything I've learned is that you change as you get older. You change all the time, and your life changes, your life circumstances. People die, people get divorced, you have grandkids. So what we want to do there is create a framework so that no matter what happens, we can sit down with this financial framework we've built for you and start evaluating and looking at options as life changes.
Okay, that's great. So we have this ongoing communication, constant communication. You're updating us, we're updating you. What's the next thing on the list?
So after our second appointment, and when we get by it, and sometimes we have to have that third appointment because so many things have changed between meeting 1 and meeting 2, we'll start looking at, okay, how do we implement this? So for instance, some of my best client relationships are ones where I can get a hold of people and start working with them a couple of years before retirement, so that if there's any outstanding issues like getting some debt paid off, paying for college for kids, all those sorts of things, we have 2 or 3 years while you're still working to develop that plan, clean up some things, and then have a very solid plan to enter retirement with, where hopefully we've kind of done all the cleanup necessary so you can go right into transitioning out of the workforce and transitioning into spending your time doing the things you want to do. So that's our implementation meeting, where we might be setting up accounts, might be doing some rollovers of accounts, looking at other insurance needs like life, like long-term care and that sort of thing, as well as developing a tax strategy for your investments going forward. I think that's probably something that a lot of people don't spend a lot of time thinking about is how their investments affect their taxes. So that all comes in our third meeting. And that's always a lot of fun because at that point, I think it starts to become real for people of, hey, we do have a plan now. We are moving in that direction towards the life that we want to live. And then from there, we go into our continuous review cycle. Now, it's funny. I've seen financial plans that some other advisors have done, and they're these beautiful leather-bound booklets, 100 to 150 pages, which are lining out every aspect of their financial life, and that's great. No one has ever read one of those, I don't think. We try to keep our plans pretty short and to the point because we know that this is a working document. We know this is going to change.
Yeah, flexibility.
Exactly. So, you're not going to get that big leather-bound binder. I mean, I can deliver it in one, but it's only going to be probably 15 to 20 pages or so.
It's just something else I have to dust, so I'm good.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So we go into our continuous review process, and what we like to do with our clients is the number one thing I tell them is if you have a change to your financial circumstances, pick up the phone and call me right away. If you have a question, just pick up the phone, shoot me an email. We can handle kind of whatever comes up throughout the year in a manner. My biggest fear, or one of my biggest fears, is a client has an issue pop up in March and knows that we're not scheduled to get together until June and just sits on it. And I know in probably a 15-minute conversation, we could have cleared it up, found a solution for them, and taken away that worry.
Hey, Royal, can you give me some examples of what kind of things you're talking about as far as things coming up in life? Like, are we talking about having to purchase a new car? Are we talking about somebody dying? Give me some examples.
Well, one that happened, I brought on a new client recently, and husband and wife, and so they have different account registrations there. And the client got the statement and was trying to figure out where about $13,000 went. And she thought that she had just lost it in the market. She didn't realize that her husband's Roth IRA came on a separate statement. And so she had to kind of dig a little bit further into the statement. So she had kind of worried about that for 2 months, waiting to come in. And then we were able to say, well, we just have to look over here to do that.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's an easy one. The other is, when you have some tax things pop up, especially, you get all these 1099s at the end of the year. You give them to your accountant, and your accountant comes back and says, okay, this is what you owe. And we've seen over and over again where a company might send out a 1099 incorrectly, especially when you're doing a IRA rollover or something like that. So if anything looks out of the ordinary there, just pick up the phone and ask the question. We can probably get it solved right away and say, yep, that's how it's supposed to be, or no, that is incorrect. Let's have that company reissue that 1099.
Gotcha.
So another thing is we've had clients where a loved one's passed away, maybe a father or a mother, and they're tasked with being, the trustee or the executor. And honestly, this is something that most people are going to deal with maybe once, maybe twice in their lifetimes. We deal with the ins and outs of inheritance and what has to happen to close out an estate all the time. So one of the best things to do, if God forbid something like that happens, is just pick up the phone and call us, and we can help guide you through a lot of that paperwork.
Nice.
To really just kind of take away the burden there of feeling like you're left out there on your own when something like this happens. One of my objectives is just to kind of simplify the paperwork of life, and that's one of the big ones right there.
Great.
So with our continuous review, we want to sit down at least annually. We want to have our annual review where we update everything. You can update us on what's going on in your life. What are some concerns, some good things that have happened. I love celebrating with clients, celebrating those good things like, first grandchildren, getting to retirement, paying off the house. Those are just fun things to hear from your clients. That's where that annual review process, that's where we're going to go in. We're going to update everything. And then we also want to do kind of a mid-year check-in because we know that a lot of times a year is a long time. And we want to check in kind of at that halfway point just to say, hey, is anything going on? Is there anything we need to cover? Are there things happening in the markets that we need to talk about? And that just kind of creates two opportunities there throughout the year where we're reaching out and wanting to sit down with our clients, as well as just constantly reinforcing, if anything comes up, if you have a concern, just give us a shout and we'll take care of you.
All right, before we wrap up today, Royal, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
Absolutely. I'm hoping that after hearing all this, the listeners out there get a sense of what we're trying to accomplish here by going through this process. And that's really kind of summed up in our tagline on our website and our business cards, which is elegantly designing the future today.
Nice.
We want to put together a plan for our clients to help them go out and live their best life and do the things that they enjoy, while at the same time taking care of all of those financial questions and financial headaches for them so they can just go and enjoy themselves.
Sounds fantastic to me. Royal, I want to thank you so much for this 30,000-foot overview of your Life by Design process and for your time today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right. I hope you, as the audience, got a lot out of this today. And I know that if you have any questions, Royal and his team are ready to answer those. So reach out to him. And thank you for listening to today's podcast, Life by Design podcast with Royal Standley. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Royal comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And this also makes it so much easier to share this with your friends and family. And I'm positive there's somebody in your life that you need to share this with, that they need to hear this so they can get that discovery process done with Royal and his team. Thank you again for listening to today. For everyone at Oregon Pacific Financial Advisors, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Life by Design podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The views expressed are those of the presenter and may not reflect the views of United Planners Financial Services. Material discussed is meant to provide general information and is not to be construed as specific investment, tax, or legal advice. Individual needs vary and require consideration of your unique objectives and financial situation. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Advisory services offered through Oregon Pacific Financial Advisors, Inc. Securities offered through United Planners Financial Services of America, member FINRA and SIPC. Oregon Pacific Financial Advisors, Inc. and United Planners Financial Services are independent companies.